Hey, welcome back. This is Clayton Squires. I'm a U.S. history teacher over at Santa Lucia's High School. And today, what we're going to be talking about is the 1920s and the foreign policy objectives surrounding that time. This is the benchmark that we're going to point out, the SS 912A 5.3. Examine the impact of the United States foreign economic policy during the 1920s. This is a hard year. A lot of people don't remember the 1920s. We talk about roaring 20s, but largely people kind of forget some of the information in between. So let's get into this real quick. All right, so during this time, it was relatively peaceful. Nothing was really going on. And we had just gotten out of World War I, and the United States started making an attempt to limit the war by negotiating disarmament with other nations. So, for instance, there was something called the Washington Naval Conference. And what happened to the Washington Naval Conference is three large nations with pretty sizable navies came together to try to shrink the amount of battleships that each country could possess. And as we can see down here, we have Japan, we have England, and the United States. Look how the negotiations and the ratio favored more westernized countries like England and the United States. Japan kind of got left out. So, as you can see down here, I put not fair. But the idea was, well, if you have less battleships, that's going to obviously mean less war. And is that the case? Maybe. But that's the idea behind the Washington Naval Conference. And then there were all these other treaties and pacts during this time. Let's look at it real quick. So we have the Four-Power Treaty, and this guaranteed peace in the Pacific. The Nine-Power Treaty promised to respect China's sovereignty. Remember this word sovereignty right here. This is China's ability to govern itself without outside influences. So without outside influences, before we talked about China with the open door policy and them being controlled by the United States and other outside Western powers. This is different. The Nine-Power Treaty respects China's sovereignty and allows them to be their own country. And then we have the Kellogg-Briand Pact. This is 15 countries pledging to give up war unless for self-defense. Wow, that sounds great. Except if there is somebody who attacks, well, then there's a war, right? But all of this is amazing on paper. It sounds really good. This is something you might see, so just remember the serial. And this is something peaceful unless in self-defense. Now let's look at the Dawes Plan. No, this is not the Dawes Act. People get this confused too. A lot of students get this confused. So Dawes Plan's a little bit different. Remember the time frames. Dawes Act was essentially giving Indians 160 acres of land. This is different. So this one is lending money to Germany after their loss to temporarily reduce reparation payments. What's a reparation payment? Well, remember, if we go back and we look at the Treaty of Versailles said that Germany was responsible for the war. So I'm going to put TV. Treaty of Versailles said that they were responsible for the war. Well, the Dawes Plan eases this up a little bit and gives Germany money so that they can reduce the amount of money they have to pay. Does that make sense? At any point, stop it, write it down, rewind it, go back. All right, and then here's the last one. So increasing isolationism. There was something called the emergency quota Act, and this put restrictions on immigration, signaling a disinterest in international migration. Now, if you look in the news, something kind of similar is happening now, especially with Mexico and some areas in the Middle East. There's been a lot of talk about restrictions on immigration. This is very similar during the 1920s. So the 20s almost parallels what we see now in 2018. All right, and what's a quota? A lot of people don't know. A quota is a fixed set of number of things. So if I have a certain quota, let's say I work at a club and I want 10 people to come into the club every hour, that's my quota. Only 10 max, no more. Any more, then I would be breaking the quota. Okay? So it's a fixed number. 10 people per hour at this club I gotta let in. All right, let's go to the Ford-Meade-Macomber Act. What this did was it raised taxes or tariffs, because these are two of the same words, on imported farm goods, very similar to the taxes that we see today on China, very similar to what we see on some of the other European Union nation states. So a lot of parallel between 1920s and what's going on right now. So raise taxes on imported farm goods. Let me just show you an example of what we mean by this. So here we have China. I'm going to use a different pen. Okay, so here we have China and we have the United States. So imagine in the United States produces rice for $20. On the other hand, China produces the same quality of rice for $15. At this price point, whose rice would you buy if you were trying to save money? Obviously China, right? But what the United States did back in this time and what they're trying to do now is they're raising taxes on certain things imported into the United States. So for instance, imagine if the United States raised taxes 40%. What that would do is raise the price of this by $6. So we would have to add on $6 because that's 40% of 15. And the rice would be $21. Now, whose product are you going to buy? The United States. Okay, does that make sense? So raise the taxes on imported farm goods. That's exactly what's happening here. I just made this number up, 40%. But just to give you an idea of how it works, and of course, you would buy the United States rice. And in theory, what that does is it helps a farmer in the United States and keeps the money in the country. All right, I hope you liked the video. Like it, and I'll see you in a little bit. All right, take care.